Geordie LaForge is promoted to lieutenant, chief engineer in a gold uniform. Lieutenant Worf is also in a gold uniform with a new baldric. And Commander Riker grew a beard. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today, we are boldly going into Star Trek The Next Generation Season 2, Episode 1, The Child, written by Jaron Summers and Job Poville and Maurice Hurley. It's one of those things where the first two are a writing team, a writing duo, and Maurice Hurley is the other writer. Directed by Robert Bowman. This was November 21st, 1988. That is a late season premiere. How you doing today, Cirroc?
Yeah, it is kind of late. I'm doing great.
Mm-hmm.
November.
Yeah, November 21st to start a season. Oh, right. Writer's strike still. That's why. Oh, and it's John Poville. I think I said Job Poville. John Poville, there's a little typo there. That makes more sense. So, yeah, writer's strike. That's why things were so delayed. In fact, boy, we might as well just get into it. In fact, this was originally pitched as a Star Trek Phase 2 script. And Phase 2 was going to be, a lot of people know, this was going to be like the Star Trek series of the 70s, where they're going to pick back up with like Kirk and Spock, and they're going to have, or maybe not Spock. I think it was a different Vulcan that was going to be in Spock's place. And it was just going to be basically continuing on the original series. But then they ended up doing a little
Phase 2?
Yeah.
They were going to call it
Star Trek Phase 2. And then a lot of those stories and, all that stuff kind of went into Star Trek the Animated Series. I believe that's what kind of replaced it. I've heard the stories, but I don't remember why it didn't end up happening. But that was, actually, I'll just read very quickly what Memory Alpha says, because I heard this, so I went and looked it up. It says, the episode is actually a rewrite of an episode with the same title written for Star Trek Phase 2, a series that was scrapped in favor of producing Star Trek The Motion Picture. That's 1979. The Phase 2 script by Jaron Summers and John Poville. Oh, Ilia, she was in the movie, and they were going to have her as a member of the cast. Ilia was impregnated. This episode and Devil's Due were earmarked for possible recycling for Star Trek The Next Generation in anticipation of what became a lengthy Screenwriters Guild strike, which delayed production on Season 2. In the original Phase 2 story, Ilia gave birth to a baby girl, Urska, who posed a similar threat to the Enterprise by having a weakening effect on the ship's hull. In the first draft, though, the alien child considered Uhura and Chekhov as possible host bodies before finally settling on Ilia. The Enterprise soon encounters an alien cylinder Chekhov? That endangered the ship and crew by creating problems that only the child, Urska, had them. Anyway, so that's really interesting. They had Ilia that was going to be part of Star Trek Phase 2, like a main cast member, and she was going to be in the Troy thing. So what they did was, when they did Next Generation, they went back and looked at all of their old Phase 2 scripts and picked some that could have worked as Next Generation scripts. And with the writer's strike happening, they're like, well, let's just use these old scripts and just change it to Troy. So anyway, that's the backstory on it.
Yeah, that could explain a little bit of why the
I'm already ready for what you're going to say.
Is so.
I've been waiting all day for this.
Yeah, I mean, because the story is, there's nuggets of good ideas somewhere in there, but the execution for me was not done well at all. And now when you say the writer's strike, it's just like, this is what happens when you don't have writers on deck to flesh out characters, flesh out storylines, and give you good A and B storylines.
You have what I call the quote, the just people. Oh, we'll just use this script for this thing. We'll just replace Ilia. They just say, We'll just do this
Yeah.
for this. And this is what happens when just people make the decisions.
Yeah, it becomes a mismatch in like a jambalaya type of like just throwing everything in there because there were so many things going on with doctor this and doctor that and this and that, and I felt like the story was all over the place. And the thing that mattered the most, it was like Troy just got impregnated by this energy thing, whatever, overnight that's about to be born right now. And the captain's like, well, where are we? You know, it was like, tell me about the containment field, India. I'm like, well, what about this? Like, this is kind of a big deal, right?
Dude, there are so many. I feel like I thought that since this was this episode, clearly when I watched it, it didn't feel like it was one of the better ones. No offense to anybody that loves this episode. I'm sure there are some defenders of this one, but I actually ended up with more things to talk about in this episode. I'm like, there are like 50 things that I thought were hilarious or hilariously bad. But before we get into all of those things, I kind of start off on the wrong foot here. We need to rewind a little bit because it opens up on Lieutenant Worf. Lieutenant Worf, he got a promotion from junior grade to lieutenant now that he is the chief of security. He went from a red uniform to a gold uniform, and they even changed his baldric, his sash, from like this frilly, tablecloth thing to an actual like metallic, cool looking thing. And when we see that, we're like, that's the Worf I know. That's a little bit better. Plus, Geordi also went from red to gold, and he got promoted to chief engineer. We've added Guinan to the show. Suddenly, we have no Beverly Crusher. Dr. Pulaski is here, Diana Muldaur. Like, Riker has his beard. It's like...
Yeah. I mean, but with like very little explanation to these new changes. Well, let's say for Guinan, for example, this is the first time I've seen Guinan, the first time Whoopi Goldberg is on screen in this episode. And she just pops in with like, there was no conversation there between Picard and her. I thought they would go back and forth with something like, like a banter that they might have from knowing each other or something. It was just like, where's the doctor? Over there. Okay. And that was her entrance on camera. Like, that was her first scene. And it was kind of a letdown for me. I thought there would be just, when you get your first scene on camera, I thought it would be, okay, this is the moment. She's going to say something slick to Picard. They're going to have some kind of like, thing that they do with each other where they both talk crap about each other or something, like, you still bald or, something like that. Or, I was waiting for the Raz or the chemistry. And it was just kind of the only thing that was popping was the beautiful hat that was designed for her in that opening scene, which becomes one of her trademark looks. But that hat, that purple, the way she looked in the purple, the way the hat sat on her, I was like, wow, she looks gorgeous. And I would like to see more of an entrance dialogue-wise for her character.
Yeah, it's just almost like, it felt like a reboot. It felt like they said, all right, season 1 had some highs and lows. We ironed out some of the kinks. Let's reboot this thing. We've got a new doctor. We've lost a couple other characters that were beloved. We've added somebody else in that will hopefully be beloved. It's clearly a beloved actress, and Whoopi Goldberg. Diana Muldaur is from the original series as well. She's been in Star Trek before, so they thought, hey, this is a big winner here. They're going to love her. A lot of changes, and a lot of people, there's that term now in the world, which is when a show grows its beard. When a show grows its beard basically means when it gets good. Sometimes shows need a season or two to get good. That show, or that saying, comes from Riker. because he grew his beard, and season 2 does get better. I think it gets a lot better in season 3. But that's saying, if you ever hear anybody that says, "Oh, the show really grows its beard in season 2," that comes originally from Riker showing up with a freaking beard and a smirk.
Yeah. I still think that, for a season 2 first episode, I needed a little bit more than this. This felt like maybe they filmed this in this, because we've seen out of order sequences of stuff too in this first season of Next Generation, and it almost felt like this is like the third or fourth episode that they just threw in there as the pilot, because it doesn't set the tone for the season enough for me. It's almost like they just dropped us into the thing in the middle, as opposed to setting the stage. Okay, here's our new 10 forward bar. Here's our new, like introducing those things.
Yeah. For me, I felt like the first 2 or 3 minutes really set up the second season, because it showed the 2 ships looking amazing. It showed Geordi. It showed Worf. It showed their promotions. It showed Riker. They mentioned the new Doctor. All these things, and then it was. So we're like, whoa! Season 2 is really.
I love the opening on the shuttlecraft, because they had that cool
gorgeous.
Shuttle. Yeah,
the shuttle bay with the shuttle, and you're just like, whoa, they're really okay. Here we go. They're really stepping up, and they're just flatlined. I actually. So here's when I pictured you, Cirroc. First of all, throughout this entire episode, I pictured Denise Crosby, our good friend, wonderful human, saying, "What were they thinking?" Because that's definitely, she said that before. And this was the perfect time to say it. But when I thought of you, let me see if I can find it. There was a specific moment where it just hit me. I was like, this is when Cirroc is looking at the clock. This is when Cirroc is checking for how much time is left. And I can't find it. I'll find it later. But there was a moment, I think there was like 18 minutes left. And I was like, this is definitely when Cirroc just checks and goes like, all right. How much more is left of this?
This episode should have played more as a comedy, and they should have taken the drama out of it, just went straight comedy, because there were a lot of comedic moments. The whole who's going to tuck Wesley into bed stuff,
that was actually really good. I was surprised when Worf says, "I will take on that responsibility." I'm like, that is the cutest freaking thing I've seen so far in this rewatch.
Yeah, that was special. I kind of like those little moments there. To me, for the comedy, this episode played good for comedy. But the drama, when we review episodes, you've always said this, and this is when I thought of you. Every time we review an episode, there's one thing that you say that's hard for you to believe, and that is somebody falling in love in one episode. Right? You land on a planet, you meet somebody, and all of a sudden they're the love of your life. You can't separate from them.
By scene 3. Yeah.
But right. So that's hard to pull off in any show, because it's just not that believable, for an adult to just have that kind of a response. There's great moments, but it takes time to build like full out soulmate status. But that's what I felt when I thought of you watching this episode. It was Deanna Troy's love for this baby, right? That happened so fast.
I thought the same. Now, however, I thought the same thing you thought. And I was like, come on, she's known this thing for 14 minutes or whatever it is, right? However, I did catch myself afterwards and say, okay, let me counter that argument by thinking, okay, she did carry the child. So there's a chemical, reaction there. There's something biologically, an attachment that happens biologically when a woman carries a baby, even if it's just for 36 hours. So but yeah, when I first saw it, I was like, what are you so like, it's kind of sad, but why are you losing your mind over it?
Yeah, I was the attachment level was like super too much for me because I just didn't believe that you would be that attached that quickly. I think you might be curious, like, oh well, what's going to happen? What is it going to look like? I've always wanted
Mhm.
this. Those kinds of things make sense to me. But the level of like, no, don't leave, you can't go. Like I just showed up yesterday.
Yeah. Like, well, I mean, what Deanna, look, no offense, but Riker clearly didn't give a shit about your son. He was the worst. We'll get into Riker in a second. But I do want to say that I did find where I thought that you looked at the clock, and it was when the kid hurt his finger and Pulaski healed and goes, that's not so bad. And right then I would or they said, can you tell us why you're here? And the baby goes, no, not yet. And I put in my notes, I was like, this is when Cirroc checked the time. But right here, when he's like, not yet,
Yeah.
Cirroc's like, all right, when then?
Exactly. They try to give me a baby explanation. When he's ready and his communication skills are better, he will let us know what he's here for. And I'm like, you know what? Come on. Come on. This
Yeah,
is
don't try to science this. This makes no sense.
no, don't put the carrot in front of me and try to get me to just keep walking along. Challenge me intellectually, and that's where I felt like there was a lack of that. It was just so on the nose. There was nothing there that was a mystery to
Yeah,
me.
I agree. Actually, uh, one more thing was Chief O'Brien was back as well,
Yeah,
doing
Chief
what he
O'Brien. Yeah,
does. Trent, don't mean to
yeah,
miss out on him. So these are all these huge improvements that really led us to think, okay, this is it. We're taking a step up. There are some changes, some good, some bad, mostly good, I would say. I think the only bad one is losing Beverly Crusher. We'd already lost Tasha Yar, but everything else felt like a step up. Things had improved in every way. But yeah, sorry, I know I changed the subject real quick. I wanted to go back to the subject, but what was it that you said?
no, I want to agree with you about those other issues that I thought were also good,
Oh,
like the you know
right.
O'Brien's.
I just want to add to what you're saying when you said that it didn't stimulate your mind, it didn't challenge you. And so my
Oh yeah,
thought was originally, let me think of one. And I was like, shit, you're right. There was not a moment that really kind of made me think. There was a moment that I thought was good when you got all these bro dudes going like, well, we should keep the baby, and Worf's like, no, we should kill him and eat him, or whatever he says, and then
yeah.
Deanna Troi says, hey, I want to keep the baby, and they said, okay, end of discussion. That was great. That was cool. I
Yeah.
feel like that may have been the highlight of the episode, but other than that,
Yeah,
I
that
wasn't
was the highlight
curious.
of the episode, and that was the there were moments there they could have taken on serious issues and caused us as the audience to think. I thought abortion was going to be one of them as I was watching this, right? So I thought there was going to be this whole pressure on her to make a decision, and this pressure is coming from the Federation and guys like Worf who are like adamant about their opinion on it, and her making the argument that no, it's I'm the one carrying this child, so I'm the one that's going to make the decision. It would have been a great place and format to have those kinds of debates, when it comes to that, a woman's right. I thought that
Yeah.
would have been a great forum to kind of explore that, especially in this kind of alien life force type of way, something that is unprecedented for, the court cases that we're used to seeing, right? Where you might have in vitro fertilization and parental rights over adoption and all of these other things we've seen play out in courts. But this would have been a whole nother thing, like, this alien kind of immaculate conception / whatever it was.
It's a great setup for a good morality play there. Yeah. But they just brushed over it. I mean, it's cool that they made a good point with it, but then they moved on. They're like, we'll make a good point, but that's not what the story's about. And we're like, maybe it could be about that, because there's a lot there that could be explored. But then I couldn't help but notice, I was like, what? Clearly this was a script that was written, for the original series and not for this, because Riker was just kind of like looming and watching and like judging. And he wasn't like, oh my God, we're going to have a baby, or Deanna, I know we've had some problems, but I want to be there for you and the child, or have a conversation. There was like, he just kind of like watched and was like, ew, that's how babies are made? Barf. Ugh. Good thing Data's there. Like, he just seems so like disinterested, like kind of scared and super judgy. What about in the meeting when they're talking about all this scientific stuff? They're like, oh my God, she's pregnant. And then Riker's like, what? She's pregnant. And they're like, yeah, whatever. And then he goes, with who? And they start talking about this scientific thing and that scientific. And he's like, yeah. But who's she? Like, he was so obsessed with finding out how she got pregnant, with who he's going to beat up. And they're just like, yes, Riker, we got to move on. We got to talk about the safety of the ship, the safety of Troy, what this thing is. We got to move. He's like, yeah, but what's his name? It's such a bro.
I thought the same thing. I was like, it turned into like a Jerry Springer moment, like, who's the father? One of those Maury Povich moments, know? He really got, and here we see Riker again. And this is when I was thinking of Denise, because Denise is always on the fact that Riker is like, jealous of Troy in one breath, but then totally macking all the other girls he can find in another breath. So once again, he reverts back in this, and he's so jealous. It's like, wait a minute, bro. I thought didn't at the end of last season you banged somebody out? I mean, seriously, you might have gotten somebody pregnant last season, so I don't understand why.
Yeah,
you're
and
so upset.
I bet you if they asked him, why'd you grow the beard out, he'd be like, I get more chicks that way. What's the problem?
What? Why else would I?
But you're right.
That whole who's the father, it was so uncomfortable for me, because not only that, he didn't have it in a private moment with her, like, hey, I need to talk to you for a second, like,
totally.
That's the way you would do that. It's like in front of everybody who's your coworkers, like, what's the dude's name, man? And when did you have sex with him? And I need to know. Yeah, like, come on. Seriously, we're at the conference table. Like, this is not the time or place to have that conversation and do your little pouting stuff. Call her to the side, talk to her in private, and ask her those questions if you really want to know the answer to those. I just felt like it really turned Jerry Springer on the Enterprise for a second.
It's so funny, because when you're talking about Denise there, I'm thinking the same thing. She would have skewered Riker in this episode.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking the people in the free-for-all later on today will be tearing him up. I'm especially curious, as always, to know what our good friend Eve England will have to say, because she's never seen any Next Generation episodes either. I think she's going to tear Riker a new one, too. She's going to be like, what's his damn problem?
Okay, so then they explained to him that, it was not another guy that got her pregnant. So, you can take that out of your head. And then instead of saying, okay, I'm going to be there for you, whatever you need, you're somebody that I care deeply for, and I want to be here by your side while you're going through this very sensitive and traumatic period and time, instead he just ghosts her, and Data's got to be the one like coach, like doing Lamaze and stuff.
And he's just watching in the hallway, like not getting too close, not offering support. He could just go there and hold her hand, for God's sake.
He's just with the creepy eyes, like,
or maybe
in the background,
or maybe he's mad because she says, "Oh, it doesn't even giving birth doesn't even hurt," and he's like, "Why not?" Maybe he just looks so judgy.
He looks
and he was
so
looming the
judgmental
whole time.
Yeah.
I'm like,
was he even fully in the room? It was like he was in the hallway, like in the doorway or something. He wasn't actually fully in the room participating. It was another example of Riker being a kind of a creepy guy sometimes, and he has moments where, look, I understand he's going to be the love interest and the handsome guy, and get all the ladies. That's cool when they write it that way, but the creep stuff, it doesn't age well.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it's almost like when Bashir is always constantly flirting with some girl, right? It's the creepy flirt. The creepy flirt looks weird.
So this is, and we're going to go to our break in just a second, but this is the perfect example of why you can't just drop a script without professional writers. There's a writer strike going on, because you know what a professional writer would do? Even if they got this script, they'd be like, okay, we can work with this. And they would make changes that would make sense. They didn't just grab the script, plug in different names, because these characters have already kind of been fleshed out, and these things that they're doing don't really fit with how we expect these characters to be. But who knows? I guess they didn't really have a choice. I presume if they have to spit out an episode and they got no writers, they just anyway. Well, let's take a super quick break.
Let me just piggyback on that really quickly. It would have been great, because you mentioned in the opening that this was for the Star Trek Phase 2, and they had considered other characters to get impregnated by this life force. If Worf was selected as the candidate to give birth to this life form, that would have made for an epic episode.
So this is real quick. Yeah, that character Ilia, she was in the original series first movie. She was a Deltan, if I remember correctly. So she's cool. Every once in a while, you'll see people cosplaying her at Star Trek conventions.
Yeah.
So you'll recognize this. She's a Deltan. This is what she also could have looked like. Anyway.
Wow.
So that was the character that would have carried the baby in the original script. But we'll hop to that break, and we'll be right back, I bet, on the Seventh Rule.